we all hold a bit of the greater truth inside of us. And it takes us coming together to understand what that bigger truth is. And I think that's the same thing applies as, with marketing. Marketing is very much of a team sport. I've learned through the years. There's a lot of things I know and have learned, but marketing and the work that I have been able to facilitate has always been better when I'm doing it with others, and whether that's um, growing and building internal teams, working with other partners, or now being a part of Atlas Rose. We're we're all bringing unique perspectives to the table that are required for us to have that sense of what's the bigger picture and what's the real truth as we're trying to help clients.
Welcome to the Atlas Rose podcast. We are excited about our guest today, David Cross. Let me tee up David like this. So, we always say it's really freaking hard to grow a marketing business. It's a mantra we repeat all the time. And this guy is in the trenches of that right now. David, he cut his marketing teeth at some lesser known companies like Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola. He sat in the CMO seat of multiple private equity backed high growth B2B companies. He's repositioned brands. He's competed head to head against Microsoft, driven real growth. He has co-founded a startup and sold it to a top 20 US healthcare system. I could go on. He has got one of the most decorated marketing resumes that you'll ever see. And right now, he is building something for himself from scratch. And that is Prodessa Partners, his own fractional marketing practice. And that gap between being really great at marketing and actually running a marketing business, that's where we're going to go today in conversation. So I'm excited about that. David, welcome to the show.
Rainy Beth, thank you so much. Very glad to be here.
Yeah. So you've been in big brands, you've been the consultant, you have served within companies on the client side, and now you're in the entrepreneur seat. Across all of those roles, what thread connects them for you?
So I think there are a few things. The one I would start with is customer intimacy. And if people aren't familiar, there's an old consulting model. It's called the value drivers, and there are typically three of them: operational excellence, customer intimacy, and product leadership. So it's an old model, very proven model. You can look at companies like Apple is product leadership, right? They've always come out with the best products, and those products help them lead in the marketplace. Walmart's a great example of operational efficiency, right? Everything they do is about the value chain and getting things as efficient as possible. What I learned through the years, and this is through thousands of interviews across companies and talking to leaders at companies, the one that really stands out the most is customer intimacy. And customer intimacy is really three things: it's know my industry, know my company, and know my business. And when you do those things really well, that's how you build relationships and then ultimately build your business. So that's the area. And again, in particular in the B2B space, because a lot of people think, oh, that makes sense in the world of consumer products. It's equally, if not even more important in the B2B space. A really good example of an automotive manufacturer I work for, did consulting work for, that we did this research with them. And everyone thought operational excellence was going to be the number one thing, right? You had to get those products to the OEMs on time. Actually, OEM said, no, we expect you to get those products on time. We want you to know our business. And if you know our business and you know us really well, we'll have a much better, more productive relationship. So customer intimacy is really at the core of everything and the core of successful businesses. So I think that's the common thread I've seen across all the work I've done through the years. Another really important one is the use of data. I actually started my career a long time ago at Procter and Gamble, and I started in market research, and it provided this foundation of understanding the market and using information to make informed decisions, and also to enable sort of a test and learn mindset. And those are the organizations that really succeed, are the ones that do both of those. So you gathering information to help inform, how do we want to go after a marketplace versus just the kind of proverbial finger in the wind is really critical. And it's easy to get some data and use that to help make some of those, again, informed decisions. And then once you're actually out and you've implemented and you're executing in the marketplace, to be gathering information, looking at that information, trying to determine what it means for us, and how do are things working the way we want or not? And if they're not, what changes do we need to make based on that information to get better? So I think that, again, using data is another critical thing that I've learned through the years. Probably one last one to talk about is this connection between strategy and execution, and it tends to be a challenge in marketing. Marketing can kind of fall into two camps. We end up with a big emphasis on strategy and figuring out what we want to do and getting all excited, and maybe there's some creative development we get all excited about, or we get really focused on tactics and what are we actually doing to execute. Businesses, again, that do the really well, perform well, are the ones that bridge both, and it becomes almost sort of a like a yin and a yang thing where they're working together, and they're working together in a constant rhythm of, we define a strategy, we put that strategy in place, we determine exactly what that means in terms of how we want to execute, in terms of how do we best connect with our market, and then we're using information we're gathering from the market to come back and evaluate our strategy and how well our strategy is working. So again, it's that sort of symbiotic relationship between the two that needs to exist. Candidly, it's an area where marketing tends to struggle in terms of bringing those together, and that's where good marketing leaders do that. And I think it's an expectation businesses should have of marketing, is that they are doing kind of bridging both of those capability areas.
I bet you've got a 4 and a 5 and a 6. I wanna stop before you get there 'cause, there's so much gold within what you've just talked about. First of all, I didn't complete my notes. You said the 3 things in customer intimacy was to know your industry, can you say those again?
Yeah, it is know my industry, know my business, and know me.
I wanted to go back through these 3 threads. So customer intimacy, use of data, and strategy and execution. And I want to have a conversation around symptoms of not doing those things, right? And I'm saying this because I'm looking at these 3 things and we know small business very, very well. We know small business very, very well. And these 3 things are often not in place before we step in, right? And just curious, and then I'll say also, that doesn't always mean that there wasn't a marketer in place either. Sadly, sometimes there was a marketer, oftentimes there is a marketer in place, and these 3 things don't exist. So, what are the symptoms in a business that doesn't have customer intimacy, that does not use data in their marketing efforts or otherwise business efforts, and then that does not have strategy and execution as an integrated piece. So let's talk about customer intimacy first. What are the symptoms, guys? What do we think the symptoms are of that?
One of them is the classic trying to be all things to all people. So they're trying to trying to position themselves as having the solution to every single possible scenario that exists out there versus making some oftentimes tough decisions around where to focus. And that where to focus translates into what products or services are you going to focus on? How are you going to message those? What have you? So then oftentimes it becomes, I really can't tell what this company does, or should I be buying from this company?
What's funny as you talk about these 3 points of customer intimacy, I was looking at it almost through the lens of the business owner, and they know their industry very well. It's probably what they're most intimate with, actually. they're probably least intimate with knowing themselves within the business and what they should be doing or shouldn't, or, or why, like, just the reminder of why they started, where they started and all those different intricacies. So that might even be the least, the place that they know the least on some ends. And then know my business. This is where I find a lot of businesses, because they're competing on everything to be everything to everyone, they actually don't know their business very well, because it became this, we talked about this Frankenstein of a business, because they added this and then they decided we're capable of doing these in our operations. So then let's get into this market, and it adds and adds, and all of a sudden they don't actually know their business the way they think they do. Um, and so it becomes this interesting dialogue with your customer as you're trying to get to know them. They're realizing that they may not understand or know themselves quite as much as they should.
Monica's a really good point. And the slight tweak I would make to that is they oftentimes know their businesses, but they don't fully understand what they've built and what it means in the industry. And that's where a good marketing leader can come in, and uh, we need to understand their business, and we need to help them understand what you have in your business. Here's how we make it relevant and differentiated in the marketplace. So it does have to be that kind of partnership. I think this one relates to the importance of relationships, and a business. I mean, fundamentally having relationships, and whether those relationships are with business partners, with ultimate customers, with advocates, what have you. And um, I always try to make it really simple, just to think, if it's the business owner or if it's members of the executive teams, to make it personal, go just think about your own relationships. Think about your relationships maybe with a significant other. Think about relationships with children or your friends or your parents, right? And what does it mean to be in that relationship, and what does it take, right? You have to listen. You have to be able to and engage in conversations. You have to meet them where they are, right? We want to take those same things that apply in a personal relationship and apply them in a business context. And that's where customer intimacy becomes so important, because without it, you can't really be in those relationships in a really productive way.
I'd say that small business particularly has a greater opportunity to do that than big business, right? Because big business is often, I mean, you talked about your number 2 is the use of data, which is obviously very present in the second one too, and has some correlations between them. But you can get so far as a small business by the fact that you can see the whites of your customers' eyes, right? A marketer or an executive or a CEO of Procter and Gamble or of these massive brands, they have to go like way, if they do it, way out of their way to go meet a customer, right? And to understand them, to be intimate with them, right? So a small business does that every single day. That's the opportunity that I think we've got. Yet we're still falling short, right? And so I love what you said about all things to all people. And this is to the CMOs out there, or even brands that have a marketer in there. If you have either zero personas, avatars, target markets, right? So if you have no person, we call them personas, so we'll just call them persona. If you have no personas, no tool that personifies your ideal customer, then your likelihood of nailing this one is pretty low. In the same vein, if you've got too many, if you've got like 3 or 4 or 6 or 8, right? If you've got a bunch of personas, you're trying to be strategic, but you're not really, right? You're trying to be all things to all people. You can never have customer intimacy with that many folks, because you're limited in your resources, you're limited in your time. So that could never work. The other thing is, the other gotcha or symptom I wanted to throw out there was, I think that if everything is to the founder's liking, you're probably not practicing customer intimacy, because they're probably not the target market, right? So if you've got a dictator standing in place, and that dictator in the CEO, in the owner, in the founder, um, has to be the sole person that has to like everything, right? Without any input from any customer or a thought process of a customer, then that's probably a symptom too. And I'll throw one more out there is just no customer experience focus. We see that customer experience is not only a strategic activity, it's one that you can build a strategy around, make it defined and repeatable, but at the very least to have it a culture, um, a culture of customer experience, really elevating the experience of the customer is one of the most important things you can do from a marketing or a business standpoint. And so if there's no customer experience focus, then this customer intimacy thing is going to be that thread is probably cut or not existing, right?
What do you, David, I think about now as a fractional marketer, your customer, the client who you're winning over, how do you facilitate customer intimacy with your client? Meaning knowing them, knowing their business, knowing their industry. What does that look like on this side trying to win business as a fractional marketer?
Yeah. So, um, great question. I think so. Some of it is I've been very fortunate through the years. I've worked in a lot of industries and I have a lot of different experience. So I can, on one hand, I can come in, whether it's healthcare, whether it's technology, whether it's service providers, what have you. I have good sense of a lot of different industries. So I come starting from that point, but I always come from a perspective of understanding. I think I used this before. Where kind of meeting the client where they are. And so there are exercises I've developed through the years. I have an exercise I call the task in hand, and I will literally will sit down either with a business founder or an executive team, and we spend some time, however much time we need. It can be an hour to a half a day usually, and we're going through what are some of the business challenges that the organization is facing, and we do an exercise to try to prioritize those in terms of their impact on the business, ability to execute, what have you. And oftentimes we'll come up with a list of 8 to 10 things that might surface. Something might be product related. To Brandon's point, there might be something about, boy, we're not really delivering customer experience very well. There might be an operational issue. But we get all that out on the table, and it helps get alignment among with the founder and or sort of an executive team, the people who are responsible. It allows us to prioritize, but it also then says, well, here's where marketing can have an impact. And there may be, let's say we come up with 8 things, there may be 3 or 4 things where really marketing comes into play. But that exercise says, hey, I care about your business. I want to understand your business, what all's going on in your business, and then we're going to figure out what marketing can do. And I think that's really critical. Marketing has gotten almost positioned as the sort of tactical execution, and we're going to go do stuff. And we've got business leaders. We got a lot of priorities over here. Now we're going to go do this. That's not the way marketing works well. Marketing works best when it's an integral part of the business. So I think that's the exercise is to ensure that marketing is fully integrated into the business, demonstrate marketing, and a good marketing leader understands the whole context of the business and how do we best, as marketers, serve the business.
That's good. What are the symptoms of the lack of use of data?
That's when you ask questions about what somebody might say, well, hey, we did really well with this campaign, or this product launch did really well. And you ask, well, how do you know that? And the symptoms is, well, we just know, or our gut. And there is a role for gut. We always talk about marketing is an art and a science, but oftentimes the science part gets left, and that's when you ask those questions and there's no data to come back. That's usually the best indication of there's just no measurement actually being done.
And isn't it refreshing when you're the person coming to the table, especially if you're in the process of trying to win business and asking those questions, where you're saying, "Well, this is what I would do to hold my efforts accountable to doing what we say we're gonna do, to something that is, that's goal related, that's measurable, that's not just going off of gut and off of we think we have customer satisfaction and all these things." Um, what a refreshing thing to come to the table and say, I'm bringing to you something, a process that I work within, a belief that I work within that literally holds me accountable to what I want to do for your business. I just think it doesn't happen very often anymore. People are very okay with surface level, not even approvals, but just affirmations, and that's enough to keep going and moving forward and not asking the questions that require them to bring data to the table.
Monica, that's used a great word, accountability. And you're right. We like, particular with marketing, there can be this feel good aspect to it, right? Oh, that
Or
execution, that,
jazzing
or
it.
I like that graphic, right? That looks really good. But it may or not be good. I go all the way back to my days at Coca-Cola. There was an advertisement that was done with an ad that was done, football ad with Mean Joe Green. And this guy, he gives his jersey to this kid, and it's all warm and feeling. That ad was pulled, and everyone was like, "Why is that up?" Because the ad, as feel good as it was, it actually didn't help grow the business. And that was a really good example. I remember early on in my career of, because I was like, "Wow, that seems really good." But when you actually did the testing behind the ad, it just didn't work.
Hmm, interesting. I've
Yeah,
s I've seen that ad. I've never heard that it didn't work.
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Huh.
But it's a perfect example. When you actually got the data behind it, it didn't work, and everyone had that same kind of. It was very surprising.
Which goes back to getting outside of, again, getting outside of the owner, CEO's opinion of what works and doesn't work. There's a lot of times when you're in the process of trying to understand the business and the brand, a lot of times at that moment in time it's just synonymous with the person who owns the company. Like that's what the existence of their brand is. So then as you try to move that forward and prove that that is that needs to be more relevant to their persona, these things help back that gut feeling of, well, this is what we've always done and what's always worked. Well, now let's put that to the test. If it is you, if it's a reflection of you, great. That's what we're going to do. But if it's a reflection of what we think your persona really identifies with and is drawn to and all those things, that's going to show too. And so we get to prove that gut feeling in through the data, which becomes less of a I told you so, and it's more of a let's just follow the facts um, in line with what was being driven by our gut, and then we get to start to maneuver based on what we see come through. And that's the beauty of the art and the science together, is that they do get to work together. Um, but eventually the light shines a little more and a little more clear if you're testing and doing those things well.
Yeah. And, and I think, Monica, that ties to the third area, which is strategy into execution. So I don't know if that was a great setup.
I'm
So thank you.
planned it
Very,
perfectly.
very well done. Very well done. Because that's where we kind of talked about gut, but the strategy again should be informed. But then as you're executing, you're coming back, and we're moving beyond. Um, it's a demonstration of maturity. So we talked about accountability. The other things that are related to that, I would say, are maturity and discipline. And as for smaller companies, it all time does tend to be a little bit more of a wild west, right? We're just trying to get things going, figure out what's working or not. But even small companies can take some of those initial steps to put in place strategy, get a little bit more disciplined about what they're doing, so they can learn and go, all right, we've actually put some thought into, and hopefully there's some data behind, or here's what we think our strategy should be. Now we're going to go execute, and we're going to measure and evaluate and determine if it's working or not. Even small companies can take those steps. I think there's a misconception that to be a small company or to be entrepreneurial, you just got to kind of shoot from the hip. That is a misconception, because even good entrepreneurs have some discipline in terms of how they're thinking about a market, how they want to tackle that market, and then how they're looking at measuring success. So I think even that's part of what I love about this, is part of what I love about being a fractional leader, is that ability to come into an organization, understand where they are, hopefully advance them a little bit in terms of some of that maturity and discipline, while still not putting in place or doing things that, like, listen, we're just not, we can't execute like that yet. Got it. But what can we do that we're advancing how the business is looking at strategy and execution?
I want to take it one further in the vein of strategy and execution. And there's a misconception that for small business that they're even that they should even do marketing in the first place. It's like not even is it to the level of execution or where we are, the maturity of it. It's I'm just too small to even start doing marketing, and that is I have found that to be, I think, very true for 90% of the businesses we've encountered. They're like, "Well, I haven't reached that maturity state or that revenue, you know, point that makes sense for me that the books say, or whatever it may be." Um, there's just this whole bubble wrapped around that. And I know that there is, and I know it to be true because I've seen it. There's a level of strategy through to execution that exists for every size of business, and they deserve it. They deserve it.
Thank you. I was going to use that word. Every business, regardless of their size, deserves good marketing. And that's, again, it's part of what I love also about the fractional model. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about what we do through Atlas Rose. We make that possible for every business, regardless of their size or regardless of their sophistication in terms of what's in place.
Yeah, I was when you were talking about back to data, my thought was another reason people don't do it, not because they don't want to hold themselves accountable, but it's just hard. It's hard to have the discipline to put in place the measure to be able to gather the data, and the discipline to stop and look at it, and the discipline to stop and look at your strategy and build your strategy. Because of small business, you just I don't know a single small business I've stepped into where the business isn't running them to a certain extent, because you are just trying to keep it going, and you have brilliant ideas and chase them, and it's that maturity that's a great connection that happens whenever you will have, instill the discipline that's needed to be able to look at the data and build the strategy.
It's
Yeah.
also a little bit of know-how. I mean, I haven't come across a ton of marketers who actually know
Know
how to
how.
test
Yeah.
properly,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a good mix of it all. I think deep down, I'm just thinking about a symptom of a couple of these things. So I think deep down, every business owner knows and every marketer knows that they should be testing things, but instead, what we tend to do is have silver bullet mentality, right? We conjure up some energy and we go and we produce this one ad or this one email, and then we get it out there and then we watch and something happens or doesn't. And if it does or if it doesn't, we know nothing. All we know is if it did or if it didn't, right? That's all we know. And so going that extra little bit, one, you kind of have to know how to do a simple A/B split test, like the method, the thinking behind it. And I'll just say, a little bit of wisdom: only test one variable at a time. If that's one thing you learned from this session, then there you go. That's worth it all. Because if you have an ad and you put that ad out there and you put another one out there right alongside it and split test it, put equal amount of traffic to both of them, but change one variable on it. So it could be the call to action, it could be the message on it, it could be the the imagery on it, or whatever. That's a good A/B split test. When you start to change two things up, you've ruined your tests. It's all over. No, you're gonna get to the end of it and you're gonna be like, I don't know really if it was this or that or what. It could be other things, right? So test one thing at a time. So there you go. A little bit of wisdom there. You should be testing. The first thing, the one thing that you put out there is not the best. It's not. That's you're never capable of a silver bullet. It can always be optimized. So if you notice that maybe you're paying for marketing to be done and they're not running tests for you and showing you how those test results are going on a very regular basis, watch out. If you are a marketer and you don't have testing embedded into your practice, it's either because you don't know how and you need to learn, or because you're being lazy. And I'll raise my hand. I'll say I've been lazy. I get it. I've been lazy sometimes, and it's because it's not easy. It's easier to just keep going, right? The pressure's there. But that's a lack of this second thread that David's given us here. Is that's that we are missing out on the use of data.
Yeah. And I think, Randy, about your point about people thinking it's too hard. And I think there's with technology, there's some of the people that say it's just too hard, I can't do it. There's others that say, well, it's really easy. I'll just plug some stuff into AI and I'll get some stuff and I'll go do stuff and it'll be fine. The reality is neither one of those things are true. And there's a lot more that has to go into it. But I think back to the point about every company deserves good marketing. I was talking to somebody last week who I live in Atlanta, um, fairly large metropolitan area, and I was talking to somebody who owns a law firm, and we were having a conversation, and he's like, "Well, I'd like to do some marketing," so he was at least willing to consider it. But so we got into the conversation of how to go about it, and I helped him understand. We did a little research. There are more than 3,000 law firms in Atlanta. 3,000 law firms in Atlanta. And it ranges from, Jim's law firm in a little strip mall all the way to 30 of the top 100 law firms are in Atlanta. So now we had that conversation, and then he was like, "Ooh, well, maybe I can't do this." But then it became like, no, you have to, because if you're going to compete for 3,000, it makes it even more important in terms of you've got to be really clear about. So this is where these two things of identity, which is your brand. So I was telling him, we need to be really clear about what is your identity, so people understand what sets you apart from any other law firm and why should they consider working with you. And then how do we engage? And that comes back to Brandon and talking about personas. Who do you really want to target? And we got very specific about all the different types of law, who he should be going after. And I think that conversation is representative of conversations with many, many, many small businesses of unless you're just happen to be somebody who's fortunate enough to create some new market and you've got that advantage. The reality is there you always have many competitors. I've done a lot of work in the technology space. Same thing. There oftentimes tends to be hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors, from very small competitors all the way. Randy, Beth, you mentioned Microsoft, right? So that's where marketing comes in and has to be done in terms of helping you understand how do you compete and achieve your business objectives in those kinds of markets.
And I love that point of diving into your identity as a brand, because if all you're doing is competing with your competitors, doing exactly what they're doing, and that's what your strategy looks like, you are by nature, or by default, I mean, you are actually just becoming a mirror image of them. You are not a unique brand. You're doing what you think you're supposed to be doing because they are too. If you know your brand and you know your persona and you know exactly what you need to do to talk to them, you by default your strategy becomes very in line with your identity, and and then it excels because of that. And so a lot of people get caught in this wheel of their strategy looks exactly like whatever their competition's doing, whether it makes sense for them or not. And so there's that alone is really freeing for a business, and talk about knowing your industry and then knowing your business. That's where that definition of really diving into those two pieces within customer intimacy is crucial, because it leads to the next and the next and the next, which makes your efforts so much more worthwhile, so much more authentic to you, and serves your core purpose anyways. So I think that's such a cool point to really hone in on is the practice of your strategy is just a really great reflection of the identity of your brand as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Which,
Yep.
which to me, um, we've been saying doing marketing, right? And some folks say, oh, I can't do marketing, or I'm not doing marketing, or I am doing marketing. And it's like, what is this doing marketing thing, right? Back in the day, back when, I mean, marketing's been around forever, right? As long as business has been around, marketing has been around. It wasn't an option. This isn't like I'm going to turn the marketing switch on and off, right? That's not a thing, because marketing. Think about the definitions of marketing. One, the most commonly cited one is marketing is just the right message to the right person at the right time, the right way. Who's not trying to do that? Everybody is trying to deliver a right message to somebody at some point in time, right? I mean, everyone's trying to do that. That's just being in business, right? Or one that I've come up with is it's sales in the abstract. Marketing is sales in the abstract. It's the same conversation you would have knee to knee with somebody, but you're doing it in a place where you can't see them. Everybody's doing that, right? If you have a website, you're doing that. If you are on an email, if you're sending an email, you're doing that, right? So that's happening all the time, everywhere. And then a third one that I like is more around customer experience is your brand is defined as the sum total of how your customer feels after every interaction with them, right? So you are branding, you are marketing, you are defining that, but your customer is defining it by their feelings. So that is happening whether you like it or not. We are all, every business on the planet in all of existence is doing marketing, right? The question is, are we being strategic and executing on it? Or are we just letting it happen to us and hoping for the best, right? That's the question.
Yeah, and that's a great point, it's sort of a marketing truism that would be another one of my themes that we cut short after the first three, but is controlling the dialogue. And that, to your point, it's happening whether you know it or not. And social media and other things have even changed how organizations interact with marketplace. But that idea of controlling the dialogue has become even more important for organizations in terms of understanding how are they uh, how is their presence showing up in the marketplace, and ensuring that across all those sort of those touch points, that the communication and the messaging is as consistent as possible, which is another point of everything communicates. And from all the organizations I've worked with, that's been one of the things that we've worked really hard to instill, whether it's somebody answering a phone on customer service, whether it's an ad, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation, whether it's even the proposal that you deliver. Every single one of those things is a touch point, and they all represent and they all say something about, as Monica said, your identity, what your brand, who you stand for, and why they should choose to work with you or not. And it's not that hard to take all those things and make sure they are working together synergistically. And that, to me, it's the role of marketing. Oftentimes, the other thing I would say, Brandon, about marketing, it oftentimes tends to be the glue across an organization, and it's oftentimes working across a lot of different functions to understand we've got this going on over here, we've got this going on over here. I oftentimes am working a lot with HR and the HR leaders in terms of a lot of internal branding to make sure that people understand who we are and they're talking about things correctly, as they're even out engaging in the marketplace or possibly posting whatever it might be. So it is a really critical role of marketing to be working across all of the functions to bring them together in a unified voice for that identity.
100% agree.
So good,
Absolutely.
which is why it's so much more important to be a leader before you're a marketer. Because if you're just a marketer, then you're staying in your silo. If you have that mindset, you're staying in your silo and you're not talking to all the other leaders in the organization that really do need to be surrounded by this epicenter of, not in an egotistical way, but in just a centralized way. Marketing just tends to have its arms in everything. I was going to bring up something I wanted to get an opinion on. As we were talking about every small business deserves marketing, good marketing, great marketing. And then we were talking about this use of data and what we're learning from it, and what was coming to mind in those two were sometimes the traps that small businesses fall into in this, effort to do it right. They often fall into the trap, I think, of perfection in what they're doing because they're doing it for the first time and they want it to be great and they want it to look just right, and every single word has to be right because they believe everyone's reading every single thing or looking at every single ad. And so just this mentality of progress over perfection for small business specifically, I think is a really difficult challenge. For businesses that I've worked with or that we've encountered. I wanted to get other opinions in the room, what that's been like for you, David, and in seeing that at the kind of the corporately the big level, and then the way that kind of trickles down into the mentality of small business owners and their struggle to put something out there that isn't perfect. rather than just learning from it. Like you said, Brandon, like just test it and then learn and fix it because everything will not be the best. Will need to be optimized. What are the sentiments of that mentality as we're engaging with clients?
Yeah, and that I love that. It comes back to the kind of conversation we had earlier around maturity. One of the things I've found effective with companies is to acknowledge that tendency or desire. So sometimes I work with a leadership team, and we'll say we'll establish a vision. And there's a tool I've used in the past. We actually call it destination planning, which is, hey, where do we want to be in 1, 2, or 3 years? And that's kind of like the ultimate success. And then we come back, and so we get that out, and we acknowledge that's kind of nirvana. That is what perfection looks like. Then what are the steps that we can take to get there? And that then it kind of gets that everyone gets energized about where we want to go, but then it also sets people back. All right, now we can't just get there. It's going to take some work and effort. How do we break it down into small, manageable steps to get there? And then each one of those steps allows us that kind of learning opportunity. So even that kind of that approach allows that sense of we're going to test and learn. We know where we want to get to, what that destination is, but let's take the small steps and learn to get there.
Is there a discipline to so I was trying to figure out how to put words to this. It's sort of what you're talking about, Monica, but maybe from a different angle. And I just had this with a client, and Brandon, I know you have, where you have this vision that you're talking about, David, and we know who the company wants to be and what sets them apart. And then as we start to communicate that message to customers so they know who we are, you almost are painting a prettier picture than who the company actually is in the moment, and yet it is what we're aspiring to be. So, does does marketing kinda drive the like, are you like a tug of war pull operationally where, "Hey, we're saying this, so we're gonna make sure that everything's in line to be that and live up to it." Or the tension that I'm feeling right now is saying, "I don't wanna put that out there because 'cause we're not there yet. I'm not ready to promise something we can't be." And and then but that's who you wanna be. That's who you're saying, and that's what sets you apart. So it's a real conflict that I have felt, and I think you guys have felt too. Where's the discipline there? What does the leadership look like in that moment?
So that's where I think strategy becomes really important because it says, let's define what are our strategic pillars for the company. And I don't, let's say service is one of them. And you're right, Randy, about we define, hey, there's an ultimate thing for service, but uh, and maybe and we there could be five things that define service, but we have one of them right now, and that's okay. And we start with the one thing and we deliver that well, but we deliver it under the umbrella of that broader kind of positioning around service that we're working towards. That's a good strategy. I love strategies that say have legs, right? So it's we put something in place. We know it's not going to work for just the next month or two, but we know that it's going to work for several years. And we're actually it's almost like Tetris or something like that, right? You're adding the blocks and you're building and filling out that picture of that strategy more and more over time.
What came to mind for me was the difference between core values and key differentiators. Right. So core values are aspirational. They should be they should be a marker, a milestone out in front of the team to help guide the culture and where it's headed and in the way we need to operate in our DNA, right? So that's core. Those are core values. And when you share your core values, they should be shared as core values and not brand promises or not key differentiators, because key differentiators are things that we claim make us different, that our customer cares about and that our competitors can't claim. Those are key differentiators. So we are saying we are those things, right? So I think that that's where and the base of our messaging is those key differentiators should not be the core values. Core values are internal guideposts, internal drivers for our culture, and key differentiators are external things that we talk about. So I think confusing those can be where some of those problems exist, right? Um, Now sometimes, and we'll look at a founder, an owner could look at the core values that were set and say we're not those things, of which then we just need to remind ourselves, no, we're not. Exactly, we're not yet, right? We are in some aspects. We're trying to be more and more every day. um but like, one of our core values is God first. Am I God first at all times of the day? Nope. Would I like to be? Yes, I would love to be. I'm trying to be, right? And we've set that as a company focus, a company core value to get better and better at every day. But for us to think that, but for us to get those confused, I think that's where a lot of problems can come in.
I think, Randy Beth, where this kind of comes together and what you were trying to, in the way that you're articulating it, that I'm understanding is this where this progress over perfection and these truths, it's like we're stepping out and talking about ourselves for the first time when we're really afraid someone's going to call us on our bluff or on something that's not
Imposter
100% on the
syndrome.
nose. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
imposter syndrome as a business, and you've never spoken about yourself. I mean, or you don't think you have. You have in the sales process, you have in customer service, you've done it in all these other ways. All of a sudden, it's this, you know, the term everyone uses in marketing is like we're just being flashy and putting things out there. And so it's this perception that suddenly we're shining a spotlight on ourselves and it has to be 100% accurate. And I think that's the tension that's felt, whether it's what we're saying or that it's the perfect image or it's the whatever, like that's the tension. So whether it's whether you call it progress over perfection or what we're saying or imposter syndrome, I think that shows up a lot in the beginning stages of what they think is marketing now, even though to your point, Brandon, they've been marketing for a long time. They've been doing marketing for a long time. Suddenly it feels like the stakes are higher. And so it really keeps businesses from producing and trying and just going and testing, again, in the vein of doing it strategically. That's the way we want to do it. But even that is scary because they've never shown a light on it before. So I think that's been my experience. But the way it presents and the way it manifests, it always looks a little different. To your point.
Owners, and I'm speaking from an owner. I'm an owner, right? And we just get in our own ways all the time. And the value of having David, you, with all your experience and with your time and your drive and your ability to coach me, to then come in and just push me. Man, that's so valuable. That's so valuable to just get me past myself and move me in a direction I can be confident in. And then we can start doing marketing or doing performance marketing. Isn't that what you do?
Yes, performance marketing. uh, there's marketing again, getting in its own way.
Which circles back to the relational aspect you spoke of in customer intimacy. So in you knowing and getting to know your customer, you become the incredible benefit and value of not being in the industry, in the business, and so surrounded by what you know. You get to bring that almost that validation to the owner and to the business of who they are and the opportunity right before them that they tend to become blind to because they're so intimate with it all. That's the opposite side of not really knowing your business. So they're so intimate with their business and the industry that they can't see the opportunity that you do and that you get to bring this validation to, which is where we're able to come in, say, yes, this is beautiful, this is the representative of your brand, let's move to the next thing, let's push, let's coach you through. That brings traction, that brings strategy to execution. I love how that all just ends up tying together and there's purpose in it.
We were talking about company taking steps, and when I hear that, I like to throw some big names out there. So, Nike now, obviously, one of the biggest sports apparel running shoes company in the world. And I will say, well, do you know how they started? And their original name was Blue Ribbon Sports.
Oh, I
Right?
didn't know that.
But yeah, so and there's so many companies that are like that. Google and others that all started, but they just got started. They learned, and they advance. Like if any of these big companies that we talk about, go look at Microsoft. Look at Microsoft and look at the iteration of how their messaging and how their logos and everything have evolved over the decades, right? They aren't just where they are now. They took a long time getting there, and so a lot of that's the one of the things I use. A lot of successful companies like that. Just go look at how they've evolved, and they all did this. They all started small. They had conversations. They developed relationships. They learned, and then they evolved.
So good. Well, speaking of your evolution of business with Prodessa Partners, um, I just want to peel back the curtain a little bit on this relationship here and how we got connected to you, David. I know we're all three grateful for what we learned from you and the experience that you bring, just being able to rub shoulders or rub elbows with you. But then having gotten to spend some time with you recently during one of our licensed marketers cohort launches and getting to, it's a real just privilege for us to be able to kind of share what we have learned over the years with building a marketing business and growing it and scaling it beyond Brandon, the original owner, being able to grow it into something that has a methodology to it and can help out other marketers, which is kind of the next big adventure for us at Atlas Rose. And so just grateful to have you come and join us in that. And want to, if there's anything else you want to add to that and kind of your experience so far with growing and building your brand and what your next steps look like in this early stages for you.
Thank you for putting that out there. I think, again, we'll go personal and then into the business world. And on a personal level, I believe, you know, we all hold a bit of the greater truth inside of us, and it takes us coming together to understand what that bigger truth is. And I think that's the same thing applies as with marketing. Marketing is very much of a team sport. I've learned through the years. There's a lot of things I know and have learned, but marketing and the work that I have been able to facilitate has always been better when I'm doing it with others, and whether that's um, growing and building internal teams, working with other partners, or now being a part of Atlas Rose. We're we're all bringing unique perspectives to the table that are required for us to have that sense of what's the bigger picture and what's the real truth as we're trying to help clients address their issues, whatever may be the task at hand. I think there's you mentioned tension before in one of the conversations. I believe in this kind of process of creative tension. Um, and it's that idea of when we're trying to solve something, that ability to solve that issue, we always do it better when we've got multiple perspectives that are coming to the table, aligned against a common purpose, and working together and kind of elevating the conversation, in many cases, to get to an outcome that we never could have achieved on our own. So I believe that's how business works well. It certainly has how marketing works well, and it's what I'm excited about with this my the relationship with Atlas Rose. So the company I'm building, Prodessa Partners, it's very intentional. Prodessa is the word means to be of service and to do good. So that is my intention for small businesses, whatever those businesses are, is to be of service to them. I believe I can be the best service to them by bringing not just me, but bringing all these other resources to bear in terms of what Atlas Rose brings to the table, and that the time that we've spent together, and all of the capabilities that exist in terms of, we've talked a lot about testing. So things that really make testing, I think, bring transparency to testing and how we're looking at all the things that we're doing and how we're testing them. The ability to actually put in place strategic plans in a very disciplined way. The ability to create a really strong cadence in terms of how we are engaging and working with clients over time. All those are all things that Atlas Rose has done an incredible job of building out. Um, and also this idea of meeting the client where they are. We have a whole range of different products and services, right? So I just was talking to somebody yesterday who's works with a lot of small city governments, and he works with oftentimes city managers, what have you. And there's an acknowledged need of they do a lot of communication, they're not really good at it. They're not really good at also understanding their identity and communicating. So we're talking about how best to serve them, and some of the sort of group coaching work that we do would probably be really good for them as a starting point to allow them to very quickly come in, very cost effective ways to learn some of these strategic principles we've talked about of personas, what have you, and then start to deliver on those. Versus other clients where we have more sophisticated, longer term ways of engaging with them, but still bringing that discipline and cadence. That's that's what I love. And so there's all these, and we talk a lot about the ability to kind of get the work done, but make sure we're really delivering the value. And that's as leaders, our time is best spent on those in those difficult conversations versus creating a spreadsheet to try to manage a plan over here, right? That stuff's all placed, it's there. So we've got all these great systems in place that then can really enable the value added work to happen so we can truly serve those businesses.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, everything that we've got in place, and the reason why we had offer it to you is our goal is for you to be as successful as you possibly can and to maximize your hourly rate, right? So that's been my biggest struggle over the last 14, 15 years is of trying to build and grow this thing is this balance between building it and then scaling it, right? And it's because there's a million things that have to be done outside of actually your billable hour, right? So the less of that you have to do and the more you can get back to your billable hour, it's just a better balance of life. First of all, it's a better lifestyle. And then two, you get to just spend your hours being billable and protecting your hourly rate. So all those things that you mentioned, community and frameworks and all those things, it's for me, it's like um, the relationship is really what's key for us. Like we would do all this for free if you'd be our friend. But but
See, it's
but we
all comes back to relationships.
it does. It really does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's great doing business with people you love. Like we say that all the time. It's so true. But we want you to be so stinking successful, right? And we're gonna do everything we can to do that. And we've given you a lot for that. So anyway, I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm glad to hear you say that. Thank you for putting those words there.
yeah. I think we're all part of we have a common mission of marketing has lost its way over the years, and we are all committed to bringing marketing back to what marketing was and what it should be in terms of how it services businesses. See, there we go. We laughed earlier about performance marketing, right? What that's marketing trying to market marketing, right? Oh, it needs to be about performance. Well, I was talking to a CEO a couple of weeks ago, and he's like, "Well, what's your experience with performance marketing?" I'm like, "Well, everything I've ever done relates to performance marketing because if you can't show ultimately how what we're doing is translating into some performance, you're not marketing. So that's just a good example of where marketing's kind of gone astray recently.